Аз точно се разбирах, защото трибунката ми бяга от там отдясно.
Имаме високопоставени гости, за което много се радваме, но преди да им дам думата, трябва да спомена задължително, че хаштага на събитието за Twitter е domain.forum и ще се радваме, ако твитвате и разказвате на останалия свят какво се случва тук. По-голямата част от разговорите днес ще са на английски език и се надявам това да не е проблем за вас. Има осигурени превод през цялото време. И сега за официално откриване давам думата на господин Валерий Борисов, заместник-министър на транспорта, информационните технологии и съобщенията.
Уважаеми госпожи и господа, уважаеми колеги, добро утро на всички. Добре дошли на този първи домейн форум. За мен е чест и удоволствие да ви приветствам с добре дошли. Считаме провеждането на този първи по рода си домейн форум за изключително навременно, предвид новите предизвикателства, пред които е изправена глобалната мрежа. Да дадем възможност на преводачите. Част от тези предизвикателства представляват въвеждането на многоезични имена на домейни, както и изчерпването на свободния ресурс на интернет протокол версия 4 и постепенното въвеждане на интернет протокола версия 6. Тези въпроси, наред с въпросите на сигурността, защитата на личните данни и неприкосновеността, все повече ангажират вниманието на правителствата, бизнеса и гражданите по целия свят. България не прави изключение в този процес. От 2000-та година в България се прилага напълно либерализирана държавна политика по отношение на интернет. Тоест, ние разчитаме на участието на всички заинтересовани страни в този процес и следваме така наречения multi-stakeholder approach. Както може би е известно, този подход на равнопоставеност за първи път беше въведен по време на първата среща на върха на информационното общество през 2003 година в Женева. Като тук искам да отбележа, че единствената сфера от интернет, която е предмет на регулиране в България, е сигурността и защита на личните данни. Нашата държава не предприема действия по блокиране и филтриране на съдържание. Този модел, който ние следваме в България, дава свобода на изразяване на позициите, като основният принцип е това да става прозрачно и по един разбираем начин. Предвид глобалния характер на интернет, безспорна е ролята на интернет корпорацията за имена и адреси ICANN за поддържането на надежността и прозрачността при управление на интернет ресурсите. Ние в България знаем, че ICANN провежда прозрачна политика, основана на стриктни правила. Независимо, че останахме основателно разочаровани от отказа на ICANN да регистрира нашия стринг на кирилица, заявен по бързата процедура за IDN CCTLDs, българското правителство подкрепя този тип политика. Една от целите на този форум е да популяризира възможността компании от цял свят, включително и български, да регистрират домейни с търговски марки, в това число и на български език. Това ще даде допълнително конкурентно предимство за известни наши брандове в онлайн икономиката. В същото време Това ще даде възможност на държавата да предприеме мерки срещу злоупотребата с монополни права върху национални символи и значими за всички българи наименования. Министерството на транспорта, информационните технологии и съобщенията ще осигури максимално широка платформа за дискусия с всички заинтересовани граждани и организации относно евентуални опити за присвояване на наименование от национално значение и своевременно ще реагира по установените процедури. Това е още една причина да изразя специална благодарност на организаторите на тази проява, Сдружение Униnet и Регистър БГ, които събраха в София всички нас, експерти в различни области, хора от различни континенти, да поговорим и обменим мисли и знания за новите домени. Убеден съм, че днешният домен форум ще има определен принос за нашите общи успехи и по-оптималното използване на интернет ресурси. Пожелавам ползотворна работа на днешния форум и ползотворни дискусии на всички участници в него. Благодаря.
Благодарим, господин Борисов. Беше важно да знаем, че имаме подкрепата на Министерството и на държавата като цяло. И сега ред да дам думата на нашия главен гост, господин Род Бекстрем, който е председател на ICANN, успешен предприемач, специалист по киберсигурност, автор на множество книги, възпитаник на Станфордския университет, учен от Фулбрайт и така нататък. Неговата биография е дълга и интересна. Но най-важното, че днес той е тук сред нас. So, Rod, the floor is yours.
I'm delighted to be back here in Sofia. And a special thank you to Deputy Minister Borisov and other representatives of the government of Bulgaria, as well as to participants across the internet industry in Bulgaria and the region that you represent. I also want to thank Nelly Stoyanova, who is our ICANN Government Advisory Committee member. Please raise your hand, Nelly, for those that don't know you. Let's give her a hand. Nelly's been very active in our policy development and review initiatives at ICANN, and we're very appreciative. I also want to say a thank you to the organizers of today's event, Uninet and Register.bg, who made this event possible. Let's give them a hand for pulling all this together. Thank you. Thank you for hosting this meeting that helps to spread the word and information about the new generic top-level domain program. And it's great to be back here in the capital of Bulgaria. And I'm also aware that thanks to the cooperation between a number of governments since 2000 and the broader internet community here, that Bulgaria has one of the most liberal legislation frameworks and policies in the world for the internet. And we'd like to see more countries around the world following your example. And we know it's also been very successful because I was reading yesterday that I think you have on average the 5th fastest internet access in the world of any country. And some of the policy measures here that are unique is that the Bulgarian government makes very clear that it does not control or govern the domain name system or IP addresses, Internet Protocol addresses, and together with other incentives has been recognized at both the WISIS and the ITU as the driving force behind the internet development in your country. So it's coming to force in an open and liberal internet environment and with excellent access for the people of Bulgaria. So we salute you. Today I want to talk about the openness and inclusion of the multi-stakeholder model and how that works to help promote innovation and to protect the security and stability of the internet. I'll also talk a little bit about cybersecurity, and then from a macro level, touch on ICANN's new gTLD program that many other experts we'll go into greater depth on later today. And I see that topic will be very well covered in the agenda. So first I'd like to reflect on the benefits of open versus closed systems. And I can do that by reflecting on my last visit to Sofia versus my visit here today. So let me ask, how many people in the room here were born before 1984? I mean after 1984. Okay, a few. So the last time I was here, a few people in the audience weren't even born. It was 1984. It was January, and it was incredibly cold. I was a student in Switzerland. I was studying at the University of St. Gallen, studying finance and economics. And in those days, you could purchase a Eurail train pass that covered Western Europe and Eastern Europe if you lived in Switzerland and in Europe. And I thought this was an incredible opportunity for a young American to go explore the East Bloc, which then, of course, was a very different place and living under a closed system. And so to contrast some of that, so when I came here the last time, I took the train from Belgrade. But the train lines weren't very good back then. And the trains would go up and down on the tracks. The tracks sometimes would be this far off the rocks in certain gaps. And the train was very slow. I think it probably went 40, 50 kilometers an hour at times, very slow. And when we came across the border from Yugoslavia into Bulgaria, they disconnected the engine of the train. And they just left the cars there. And there we were sitting in the countryside, very cold, no electricity, no heat, and wondering what's happening. But we finally made it to Sofia. The train was about 3 hours late. And so it was late at night. It was about midnight. And it was cold, and it was snowing. And, you know, we were poor. I was traveling alone, and I met another young student person. And we thought we'd go find a youth hostel to stay in, because those were not very expensive. And so we had a list of the youth hostels. So we walked a half hour through the snow. And we came to the youth hostel. It was closed. And we're like, okay, thank goodness there's 2 more youth hostels. So we walked to the next youth hostel for about another half hour through the snow, and it was closed. And now we're getting really tired. It's late. It seems like it's, I don't know, it was late at night. We walked to the 3rd youth hostel, and it was closed. So then we said, we're really in trouble because we don't have any much money, and we have to sleep somewhere. So we asked someone who spoke English, and he said, oh, go to the In-Tourist Hotel, okay? So we went to the In-Tourist Hotel, and they wanted $120 for us to stay for the night. And this was an amount of money that was unimaginable to us. So we couldn't do that, and it was snowing, and it was really cold. And so we said, well, let's just go back to the train station, and we'll sleep on the benches. So we went back to the train station, and we slept on the wooden benches. And then we got a special wake-up call in the middle of the night. That was the butt of a gun slamming against the bench by our heads of the soldiers telling us we couldn't sleep in the train station. Apparently, I mean, we didn't understand Bulgarian. So we went back out, walked around the snow for another hour, then went back to the train station, slept again. But Bulgaria then, you know, when I look at Sofia in 1984, there wasn't the beauty there is today. There was not as much choices. There were not very many stores. Everything seemed very gray. And clearly there was not the free press. There was not the free sharing of ideas and everything that we have today. Coming back today now, and last night, Vinny Malkovsky, our regional manager, who's from Bulgaria, as you know, took me for a wonderful walking tour of several hours through the city along the Yellow Road, and seeing the beautiful castles all restored, and the churches, and so many restaurants and cafes, and so it's just remarkable to see the progress here. And I think it's the benefit of an open system, and an open system that your government has supported with the liberal internet policies as well, which tends to be a fertile environment for society to progress and advance from. So I think that your story here is quite amazing. I think it's an interesting time for the world as we look at the pressures upon whether it's the euro or different currencies and government and federal systems in the world. There's a call by some parties to become more nationalistic again or more protectionistic, and there's a risk we have of going back to more of a closed world. And I think we all hope that we don't move in that direction at this really important time in human history, where we have both so many challenges and so much opportunity. So speaking of the global picture, our planet is getting quite large. Last week, in terms of population, last week the United Nations announced that we had just passed 7 billion citizens on the planet. The last time we passed a billion was 1999. And in 1999, the 6 billionth person was born on the planet. And the United Nations said that was the son of refugee parents in Sarajevo. But that was also the year 1999 when Google became part of our vocabulary and also our search tool of choice. It's when Google moved out of the garage into a real office. It was the year that Sean Fanning founded Napster. That seems like ages ago. And it shook up the entire music industry that's still changing today. It was also the year that the euro debuted or appeared as a financial instrument in corporate and investment markets. It was the year that banks and many people were concerned about Y2K, or what would happen with software. You were probably selling many expensive software and computer solutions then to the government of Bulgaria and others. To corporations. To corporations. Yes. So, as I know, the deputy minister was at IBM for many years, and so Y2K was a very big event in the technology world. Well, it ended up not being such a big event when we actually got to January 1st of 2000. But amidst our celebrations on New Year's Day of 2000, there were a lot of concerns leading up to that. Now, what's remarkable is if we go back to 1999, how many internet users were there in the world? 280 million. Only 280 million. And the United States was the dominant portion of that, followed by Japan, United Kingdom, and Germany. And in 1999, believe it or not, the average user used the internet a few times per week. I see the surprise on the face. So now look 12 years later. Today, the largest number of internet users of any country live in China. And if you're like me, most of us now depend on our smartphones, our tablets, and our PCs every single day, much of the time, for our communicating. So the internet has really changed the world, and the world has changed with it. So we live in a brave new world. And some people refer to this as the cyber world. And now that we've unlocked the virtues of the intellectual property and digital connectivity, our lives are headed towards unimaginable changes and achievement. And we cannot go backwards. We've walked through the gates. We cannot go backwards. And it's almost like when man discovered fire and found that its warmth and ability to cook food was such an advantage to his life that man never gave up fire and has mastered fire for many thousands of years and has never given it up. So the internet has also changed us, and it's something that is integrated into how we live and in how we organize our own lives and in how society works. And so we're all going through this change together, and we're all students of this change. And in fact, when I walked in, it was funny because someone said to me, Tony actually said to me, he said, "You're the boss of the internet, right?" And my colleague rightly responded, "No, Tony, you are." Because everyone's the boss of the internet. The internet is a decentralized phenomenon that defies all centralized control, and which is humbling many hierarchies in the world. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the security aspects of the internet from the experiences that I've had. And so my own background was, as the introducer mentioned, I started my career when I was a lot younger as a high-tech software entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 24, when I was at graduate school, and later took that company public. And I've been an officer of private and public companies, and I've also worked in the government, and I've worked on perhaps the world's largest cybersecurity policy framework at a national level and architecture. And then I've been here at ICANN working on internet governance and the DNS-related cybersecurity issues. And those have given me we all have unique vantage points. We all can see the world from a different place. And it's been an interesting place for me to see what's happening with the internet. So let's talk about ICANN's role in that for a moment. ICANN works with 242 countries and territories in the world. So that's more than the United Nations, because we not only work with countries but also with territories, because most territories also have domain name extensions or country codes. And what we do is, I think most of you know, is we're the coordinator for the domain name system, which means the policies for all the domain names and the delegation into what we call the root for domain names for the top level domains. We also coordinate the internet protocol addresses, IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. And then we also provide some publishing services for the Internet Engineering Task Force. So how are we going to use this internet in the future, and how have we come here? One of the things that's interesting is that, the internet has actually expanded in some ways like the inventors of the internet hoped it would. And that is, when they designed this system, it was designed to be extremely decentralized and to not need centralized control. And so it's evolved through the work of ICANN, the Internet Engineering Task Force, which predates ICANN, and the Internet Governance Forum that Bulgaria is also very active in. And that process continues to evolve the platform. And the bottom-up consensus process for developing internet policies works. And we believe strongly that the multi-stakeholder model is the best model for supporting the continued innovation of the internet and keeping it unified and open for the benefit of the world. And that clearly can be at risk, as some parties don't wish to see the internet so open and so unified, because they would rather have some control type of structure, or a greater control type of structure where only one party has the voice. So last week I was at the cybersecurity conference in London, which was quite interesting and quite well attended by delegates from around the world. And I was talking about how greater connectivity leads to greater vulnerability. Because the reality is that anything that's attached to the internet can be hacked into. And what's being attached to the internet? Everything. So that creates a context of very significant vulnerability for systems. And it means that this is an issue that we're going to be working on for a long time together to build better security, better control, and to sort of clean up the networks so it's a better place for good actors and not such a good place for bad actors. And the reality is that today, just a few cyber mercenaries, for example, can threaten national electrical systems and other critical infrastructure. And a lot of our daily life could be disrupted. So how are we going to protect ourselves? I mean, if anything connected to the network can be hacked, and everything's getting connected, I mean, how are we going to work on this problem? And some people think, well, maybe we just need a better piece of technology or some set of technologies, and that'll solve it. But I really believe that the only way to enhance our security globally is through greater collaboration, and is building more good networks to counteract bad networks. And the future of the internet is going to also rely on evolving the internet in a fashion that makes it inherently more secure than it's been in the past. So the assertions, I like to make 3 assertions about where we need to go to help create a more secure internet together. And the first one is that the best way forward is a decentralized multi-stakeholder model to make sure that we enrich this model and that we spread this model and that we drag it deeper into all aspects of internet coordination and internet governance. Because we know that the multi-stakeholder model works. And how do we know that it works? The internet works. And the internet itself is the greatest collaboration exercise in human history and is run on a multi-stakeholder basis. And we've talked about how it's kept the domain name system so open, and that's why today is important as we talk about new gTLDs, which is another opening in the frontier of domain names to allow more choice, whether those be in Latin characters or internationalized domain names such as Cyrillic or others. And the benefits of an open domain name system have gone by and large to the users. And when ICANN was started, domain name prices were much, much higher. And one of the goals was to create more competition in the market. And the price on .com domain names has dropped over 70% since ICANN's founding. And there's other options as well. In fact, some represented in the room, whether that's .asia, .biz, .info, .mobi, and .tel. I see Michele Nalon back there who's involved, I believe, with .tel, aren't you? No? Oh, you're not. Sorry. Did the plug for someone else. But these have given people choices. And so preserving the multi-stakeholder model is critical for internet security itself, as well as the evolution. The second thing is that we have to continue efforts to re-architect the internet for security. The internet was not designed for security. The internet was designed for openness and flexibility. And now we have to go back and do work on some of the core architectural pieces to enhance the security environment. Some of those pieces that ICANN touches are, the first is DNSSEC, or a secure version of the DNS, also known as DNS security extensions, which adds a cryptographic key to domain names so that when you visit a website, you actually know that you're communicating with that website and you're not suffering a man-in-the-middle attack or having someone present you with false information that looks like real information in a web page. And we have signed the root of the domain name system with DNSSEC as of last July. And there's about 70 top-level domains in the world today that are DNSSEC signed. I'm not sure about .bg. Is .bg DNSSEC signed? It is. Great. Fantastic. So your users here, you can choose to turn on DNSSEC validation, and turn on DNSSEC with your domain name, and that then adds a level of security for your customers, assuming your ISPs are supporting that. And we urge the Deputy Minister to encourage industry here, the ISPs, to all turn on DNSSEC validation in their resolvers. And we encourage users to make sure and add plugins to your browsers for DNSSEC, or to use other DNSSEC tools on your desktop. But DNSSEC is important. That secures the domain name system. There's also work underway to secure the addressing blocks. And there's an effort called RPKI, which is underway. That'll take some number of years to work through the global community. And then also there's work on routing, which is called, with a standard called Border Gateway Protocol Secure, or BGPsec. So that's some of the work that we all have to do to move the internet forward in terms of security. And we appreciate the registry here supporting DNSSEC under .bg. Thank you. The third assertion I have is that you can improve the internet by joining us and by getting involved, like you are today. As many of you may also be getting involved in the new gTLD program. And we're going to have our next public meeting. We have 3 large policy meetings every year. Typically 1,000 to 1,700 people come and participate in the policy meeting. The last meeting we just had in Dakar, Senegal, 2 weeks ago. And the next meeting is going to be in San Jose de Costa Rica in Latin America in March, but we're going to be right next door to you or nearby next June in Prague. And so please come to Prague next June and join the ICANN public meeting. Share your views, get engaged in the community. I'm sure Nellie's going to be there as a member of the GAC. We hope the Deputy Minister will also join us and come by, and other leaders from Czechoslovakia. So those are some of the things that we can all do and work on together to enhance the security of the Internet. I also want to talk about some of the other changes that have gone on in the past couple of years. ICANN has been changing. So 2 years ago, we signed the affirmation of commitments with the U.S. government. That moved the review, the oversight of ICANN from the U.S. government to the global community. And there's now review teams with participants from many countries in the world, more than a dozen, probably more than 2 dozen, on the different review teams, looking at ICANN policies and actions in different areas and formally reviewing them. So that was a significant change. It also triggered other changes in our community. Also, the Government Advisory Committee, or what we call the GAC, has enhanced its role in ICANN. And this March in Brussels, we had the first ever formal pre-consultations between the GAC and the ICANN board. So over 40 GAC members, 40 different countries represented, and the entire ICANN board met for 2.5 days in Brussels to discuss this new generic top-level domain program. Governments requested about 80 changes in the program. We were able to accommodate about 70 of those, and that's a very significant response to the important role of governments. So we like to think overall that ICANN represents multi-stakeholderism at its best. And we always have further room for improvement, but we're open, inclusive. The board is from around the world. We have representatives on the board from all 5 regions. You, of course, have had a board member, at least one board member here from Bulgaria. Vinny Markovsky was on our board. We have board members from Asia, Latin America, Africa, all over the world. And we continue to move things forward, including this new generic top-level domain program that you're going to be hearing more about today, and that we genuinely hope will introduce further competition into the domain name industry and further increase the international participation in this multi-stakeholder model. So again, it's just wonderful to be back here in your beautiful city. And in fact, I should also share, last night I had, was it Muvrat? Is it the Mavrut wine, which is quite spectacular, from Vitsina. And I see that you're, among many other things, many other contributions, you're becoming a great world winemaker, but really tremendous progress that you've made here in Bulgaria in contributing to the world. And you've always had such a strength in science and technology throughout history and mathematics. So it's just wonderful to be back here. Thank you for joining this program today and the opportunity to speak to you. And I think that we'll take a couple of questions, if that's all right. Please.
So if you have questions, of course, you're welcome. Може да задавате въпроси на български език.
And if there's no questions, I'll start asking you questions. So Lizzie, actually, you have what I think about 60% internet penetration today in the cities. And in the countryside? Lower. And in the cities, I heard you have high-speed bandwidth for only like 10 euros a month or 12 euros, equivalent of 10, 12 euros a month. And how can you do that at a lower price than most other countries? How are you able to do that? It's a domestic secret. Well, that's a good exercise.
But this is a competition.
Sure.
Because of the competition, we can achieve such price.
Sure. And how is the move towards IPv6 going in Bulgaria?
It is slower than we want, but we are going in the right direction, I'd say.
And how do you encourage companies and ISPs and others to move to IPv6? Is it just education mostly, or is it also different incentives or programs?
It is about communication with the business and the administration. So we talk about the way from IPv4 to IPv6, but you know, in this stuff, it's a little bit difficult because of the financial restrictions at the moment, and therefore we concentrate our efforts to get as much as possible European funds for transition from
Има сега посланик.
Аз питах начало. Каза ли нещо от тези? Не съм слушал.
Excuse me, the mic is not working, and I would love to hear this.
Oh, you can't hear it? The microphone closer, maybe?
Is that better now?
Much better.
Okay, thank you. So these are our plans for, let's say, next 6 months.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod, as well. If you have questions for Rod and for everyone here, you can meet us during the day and in the evening. So everyone is welcome to contact Rod later on. So thank you for this presentation and the introduction of the meeting.
Part of the #1 group in Europe on corporate domains, and obviously we are extensively involved in the new gTLD program, both as a registrar and also through the ICANN process. And being involved in that, for me personally, also means chairing the generic name supporting organisation, the GNSO, which is ICANN's policy development body for gTLDs and more specifically for new gTLDs. Obviously I'm not speaking for the GNSO today, but the work that the GNSO has done over the past few years has led to this program being in use next year, we hope, starting early next year, and we will run through that in a minute. So, next slide please. So just as an introduction, if you run through the animation there, you'll see, just run through it. So just as an example, and to explain to you all what we're talking about, I didn't want to assume that everyone in the room knew what a domain name was and what new TLDs are about. So as a very brief introduction, you'll often hear, probably during the day today and during any new gTLD conversation, you will hear people using acronyms. And one of the acronyms that people will use most frequently is TLD, which means top-level domain. So I wanted to explain that when we talk about TLDs or top-level domains, what we mean is the part of the internet address that is furthermost to the right of the domain name. So on this example, it's the part that you can't see, unfortunately, because the slide is cut off. But I was using an indom example of indom.com. So .com is your top-level domain in this example. And as most of you know already, I'm sure, you can register what we call a domain name, which is the part of the internet address that is next to the TLD. So in this case, my company is registered indom.com, and that becomes our domain on the internet. That is why we use the word domain. It becomes our territory. It becomes the part of the internet that we are able to manage. So in this example, anything to the left of indom.com, indom being the second level part of the address, anything beyond that is ours to control. And in this example, I've used test page as an example of a third level domain or a subdomain that we could configure on our servers and make available on the internet, so that anybody could type in that address, www.testpage.indom.com, and don't try it, doesn't work, and get to a web page that we would put on our servers and make available online. So that's the basic theory. And in this context of existing gTLDs, existing generic top-level domains, there are two types of top-level domains, generics and country codes. You obviously know your own country code domain as .pg for Bulgaria. Country code domains obviously only reference countries. They use the ISO table codes, two letter codes for countries. The top-level domain for France is .fr, for Germany .de, etc., etc. And beside that, we have today 22 gTLDs, generic top-level domains. Some of them are well-known, .com in our earlier example, .net, .org. Some are slightly newer and present us with a different set of problems. There's already been a case of mistaken identity with .tel today, but there is also a new internet top-level domain that is of great interest to many people at the moment, and that's .xxx, which is the 22nd gTLD to be approved as part of a process that was initiated by ICANN in the year 2000. So this program, more specifically, the new gTLD program that ICANN has been working on for the past few years, intends to bring more gTLDs to the top-level space. And the idea for doing so is, first of all, to bring more innovation and more choice to the internet user. Innovation for people to explore and enact ideas that they may have for certain TLDs, and more choice for us all as internet users to develop and use the internet in the way we see fit. And if you look at the internet as it is today, with about now 215 million registered domain names, roughly half of which, a little less than half, are .com domains, you understand that the specificity of the TLD namespace is somewhat lost by the advantage, the market advantage that .com enjoys today. Now that may be a good or bad thing, but it is the situation we have. And some of these generic top-level domains, like .xxx, for example, which is an example, or .cat for the Catalonia culture, which is another example of specifically targeted domains. Some of these domains aim at giving the internet user more targeting and more a better and more efficient label to the content that they're looking for. So part of the theory behind the new gTLD program is to do exactly that, but on a much wider scale. And it's to do that also with a new technology called the IDN, or the Internationalized Domains, which are domain names that do not necessarily have to use the ASCII system. ASCII is the standard Latin script that is used on domains today, that we have known and used on the internet since the internet has been launched. And the ASCII system is one that precludes the use of special characters. Now, I don't know much about Bulgarians, the Bulgarian language, but I know that you use Cyrillic, and that does not fit in the ASCII space. And I'm French, and in France we also use certain characters that do not fit in that space. We use accents, for example. So to allow the internet user not to have to change the way that you or I speak and write, but to use our own natural language scripts, the IDN technology has been developed, and the new gTLD program will incorporate that. So a new gTLD applicant can apply for an IDN type script, something in full Cyrillic, for example. Just to touch on what applicants can get out of it, and some of these applicants will be generic type strings. Some of these applicants will be geographic type strings, so cities, regions. There are certain restrictions, but some of them will be new gTLDs. And as part of this, some of these will also be brands, companies wanting to put their own namespace, their own word, their own trademark on the internet at the top level. And why would these applicants want to do this? Part of the reason for that is that they want to get more control. Because at the moment, being on the internet for them means being under the .com space, for example, as you saw earlier. And some of these potential applicants don't feel comfortable with that. They want to have full control over their namespace. I'll give you a quick example of what I mean. If you have a bank, for example, some banks don't feel secure about sending their online financial transactions over the .com namespace because they don't control .com. So they don't fully control the security specs that are used in .com. Now, .com is a very secure space. It's been around since the internet began, and it's never failed. But some companies, nevertheless, may not feel secure about that. So the new gTLD program is the first time for them that they have an opportunity to get some control back and not use someone else's system. So that's a very important concept. And it's a concept that you need to understand the motivations behind some people doing this. And in talking about this, we also talk about fraud. Now, there was a mention of this earlier on. Fraud is a possible problem for many people on the internet today. And the new gTLDs also aim, in some cases, some projects will aim at controlling that fraud. So we are looking at ways to improve the user experience, but we're also looking at ways for applicants to enact possibly a safer namespace for themselves in that specific namespace. So if you just run through that, I wanted to, if you press that several times, I just wanted to give you an idea of the two tracks that we have at the moment as part of adding TLDs to the root, the internet root. Part of this on the left here is the new gTLD program that I've just been describing, and part of some of these applicants, potential applicants that I have just mentioned. So city names, for example, brands, communities, generic names, IDNs at the generic level. Some of these are ready to launch when the program starts early next year. And I've also mentioned about the IDNs. Now, notice that the second track is IDN CCTLD, country code domains, because there's a program at ICANN that started just before the new gTLDs in terms of becoming live. It became live a couple of years ago, which is called the IDN Fast Track, which allows countries to request their own specific country name as an IDN. So, for example, there is a request by Russia to start a .rf in Cyrillic for Russian Federation, and that has been very popular. It launched last year, if my memory is correct, and it immediately went over 500,000 registrations, which is huge. I mean, it is an amazing number of registrations for a new domain. So, as you can see, and these are still top-level domains. What we're doing is we're adding domains to the internet root. So both of these tracks have to be taken into account by ICANN in order to make sure that the internet route itself doesn't break down in any way. Because what we're doing today with this new program is something that's never been done before. So far, we have, as I mentioned, 22 gTLDs and around a little less than 360 ccTLDs. So if tomorrow we have, let's say, 10,000 new gTLD applicants, you can see that's going to make a big difference. And at the technical level, it's something that has to be looked at. Next slide, please. So, once again, apologies for these slides being cut off, but just to give you a little bit of a history lesson. As I mentioned, there has been launches before. If you go back to before ICANN was created in 1998, the existing domain namespace was what it was then. So domains that we all know and love, like .com, but .gov, .net, .org, .arpa, other domains, gTLDs, that were the initial set of gTLDs that were put on the internet. In 2000, there was a first proof of concept round that was launched by ICANN, excuse me, and that involved domains that would be very open, that would still reference a specific type of use. So .aero for the aeronautical industry, for example, or .museum, which is a domain that few people know about, but it's been around for a good number of years. And it services the museum industry. And it's a domain that actually the TLD operator would like to see grow a little more, because it feels there's potential there, but it's underused. Currently, I believe it has roughly 500 names in that namespace. So that's less than some of us in this room have domain names. So we are probably a bigger registry than .museum. But that does not preclude that the quality of the registry and the purpose for which it was launched, which is to service museums, still is a valid concept. In 2004, there was another proof of concept idea, this one tailored to what ICANN called at the time sponsored top-level domains. So top-level domains that would reference a specific community. And I mentioned one or two earlier on, .cat, .xxx. These are obviously targeting specific communities. So what we've done here is, or what ICANN has done, is launch proof of concept rounds to test the system. And now, if we activate the next slide, we are moving on to the new program itself. And to get here, there's been a lot of community work, because ICANN is a community-driven system or organization. And the first part of that community work happens at the GNSO. So the GNSO being, as I said earlier, the entity within ICANN that controls or manages the policy development process for generic level, top-level domains. The GNSO worked from 2005 to 2007 to develop a program called the new gTLD program and a set of recommendations for that program. Some of these recommendations, for example, were that there would not be a launch of the program until there had been a sufficiently lengthy communications period to ensure that everyone around the world was aware of the program, every potential applicant, as possible. And this is part of what ICANN's doing today. This is part of the reason that today, just before me, you had the ICANN CEO come and speak to you, because the idea is to spread the word as part of that program. So there was a lot of work going on at the GNSO level from 2005 to 2007, and that work was overseen by a predecessor of mine chairing the GNSO, who just stepped out of the room for a minute, but she is with us today, Avri Doria. The work entailed a significant amount of what we call working groups and other policy development work to ensure that the recommendations fit all the stakeholders that are part of the ICANN multi-stakeholder model. So some of these working groups on IDNs I've mentioned, on reserved names. What are the names that you cannot register as a TLD? Either because they would infringe someone else's right, or because they're a geographic name that needs to be reserved. There may be some good reason for not releasing everything. There was a working group on rights protections to make sure that trademark holders don't have to suffer because of a new gTLD that's going to come and try and infringe on their trademarks. And there was input from several groups, like governments. You've heard about the GAC. You have the GAC representative of your country here today. And ALAC, the users that are represented within ICANN as part of the at-large advisory committee. They had some input into the process as well. That went on until 2007. There was a supermajority vote of GNSO level which approved the set of recommendations. That was sent to the board, and at that point, when the board, the ICANN board, receives a supermajority vote, that means everyone's in agreement, by the way, from the GNSO, it has no choice but to approve that policy unless it can give very, very good rationale for not doing so. So the board approved the policy in 2008 in Paris, at the Paris meeting, and from that point on, the program went into the implementation phase. So that means ICANN staff, working with the community, develops the actual rules of the program. And you can see that the approval of the program included some of the parameters on the slide here. And if we move to the next slide, you'll see that the work that ICANN staff has done over the years has been extremely, extremely extensive. So we've had 7 different drafts of what we call an applicant guidebook, which is a set of rules that applicants will have to follow to register a top-level domain. The final version that we have today is the 8th version of that manual. 47 comment periods, that's a huge amount of periods where everyone in the community was able to submit comments and say, oh, what you've proposed here I don't like, you should be doing it this way. 55 reports or explanatory texts, studies, consultations, developments of different dispute resolution policies. A lot of work has gone into getting to where we are today, which is the approval of the program on June the 20th of this year by the ICANN board. And since then, next slide, we'll move over that one. It's too small to read anyway. Since then, the program itself having a firm launch date, that date being on January the 12th of next year. So what you're going to have to do, if you want to apply for a TLD on that date, you're going to have to answer 50 questions as part of the applicant guidebook. There is a questionnaire with 50 questions in it. 11 questions reference the applicant's information, 12 the string information, so what's the TLD that you want to apply for, what are you going to do with it. 21 questions reference the technical and operational capability of the applicant. Obviously ICANN will be looking very closely at, are you able to register a TLD? Are you capable of managing the TLD if ICANN gives it to you? And there will be some questions on your financial stability as an applicant as well. Are you financially stable enough to run a TLD and sign a contract with ICANN to do so for at least 10 years? The application window, as I mentioned, opens on the January the 12th and closes on April the 12th of next year. So that's actually not much time to get ready. And if you're thinking of starting a TLD, I urge you to come and talk to me, obviously, as soon as you can, or any of my colleagues, to get a better idea of what you need to do as a TLD as soon as you can, because the end of the application window on April the 12th, and another date that's important is March the 29th, when the ICANN's online registration system will end. Those dates are non-movable. They're non-movable goalposts. If you're not ready by then, you will have to wait until the next round, and we don't exactly know today when that could be. The cost is $185,000 to ICANN. There are additional costs, my fees, for example, if you come and see me, but there are additional costs involved even if you're doing it yourselves, in terms of starting up registry infrastructure, planning, selling to registrars, and there's a panel later on this afternoon about the concept of putting registrars on your side if you want to start a TLD, which I think will be of great interest to you if you are potential applicants or if you're interested in this. You have to remember that it's not just having a good idea, it's also selling it if you want your TLD to be successful and your TLD is commercially based. Next slide, please. So, once again, a truncated slide, sorry, but just to give you a time overview of where we're going now. The submission window, I've already mentioned the dates. Once the submission window closes, ICANN will post the received applications on May the 1st of next year. That's a very important date. And it's a very important date because that is the time when we will all know how many applicants there are. And some of us will know if there are applications that are potentially bothersome to us. For example, someone applies for a TLD that looks very much like my own company name. And in that case, I will be made aware of it beforehand, which is not what happens today, by the way. If you register a domain name today, if you have a trademark today, someone registers it as a domain name. At best, you'll know when they registered it. At worst, you'll know when they've set up a lovely site with naked women on it and using your trademark to drive traffic to that site. So this program takes a slightly different stance. The idea is to publish all the applications before they're even ICANN even starts to approve them, to give everybody a chance to complain or to put up their hands to say, this TLD is a problem for me, because it infringes my trademark, because it does another thing, because it is a problem. That's something that's very important so that people can raise objections. And following on from that, starting in June, ICANN will start the evaluation process. So that is going to go on for a good number of months, and during that time ICANN will look at the applications received and make sure that they are sufficiently good to become a TLD. So that the applicant has researched his project well enough and has the technical, financial, admin capabilities to run a TLD and not break the internet. Because it's important to realize that we're not registering domain names here, we are registering TLDs. And that's a very, very different kettle of fish. And if you set up your own domain and it breaks, basically the only person that's impacted is you and your users. If you set up a TLD and it breaks, let's be honest, no one really knows what's going to happen. If you have 500 new TLDs tomorrow and they all break after 3 years of use, it's not clear today what's going to happen, but there's one thing that's clear: you don't want that to happen. So ICANN is looking at that, validating those TLD applicants very closely. That's it. Happy to take any questions if there are some, and if not, I'll try and work on my MacBook Air to make sure that it shows PowerPoint presentations properly. Thank you very much.
Questions?
ли се някаква част от събираната такса за някакъв фонд? Планира ли се някаква част от таксата да формира фонд за защита на интереси и евентуални процедури на компенсации и т.н. за заинтересовани страни? Във връзка с защита на интелектуалното право, тъй като тази процедура за предварителна нотификация на възможни заявки на такива gTLD, в последствие може да се окаже, че някой е получил вашата марка и тогава процес ще бъде насочен към ICANN и последващ веригата по регистрация на такива gTLD. Планира ли са някаква част от тази такса да отива за такъв фонд?
Thank you for your question. Now, I should stress two things. First of all, I'm not speaking for ICANN, but as someone who knows a little bit about the program. And secondly, the dispute resolution process that I've very briefly outlined here, because we will be speaking about, and other speakers will be speaking about this today, all throughout the day, is something that ICANN will not finance above putting the program in place. So if you want to lodge an opposition, an objection to a TLD being started, you will be paying the costs for that. Now the application fee is explained by ICANN as being there to cover ICANN's costs for the program. ICANN being a non-profit organization, it has a requirement to make sure that the development costs of a program like this are covered by the fees it takes in. Now, I'm not going to go into the debate now of whether that fee, the $185,000, is too small, too big, the right number to cover those costs. But the fee itself, ICANN has alluded to the fact that the fee itself, if it proves too big, for example, if there's 10,000 applicants, then part of the money, the excess money, would be put in a fund. There's no clarity as to what that fund exactly is today. It's not my own personal pocket money fund, unfortunately, but there is a desire or an intent to make sure that if there's excess fees, they don't just go into paying ICANN staff or costs that don't exist today. So that logic is there, but the fee is not planned to go to help pay for an objection process. That is a separate process, and if you want to object for it, or if someone objects to your TLD, you will incur additional costs, possibly, to handle that objection process. I hope that answers your question.
Is another question over there?
Good morning. I am George Papapaglou, and I am a representative of the GAC from Greece. So I would like to complement your answer to our friend. Some problems that may arise may be problems of public interest, an important matter, a geographic name, something which a government may judge is of public interest. In that case, the government, including the Bulgarian government obviously, will have the possibility to express its concerns. This will not be called an objection, it will be called an early warning in the first 60 days after the launching, after the publication of the names. And this will be without cost. So if there is an issue which is serious enough to be considered by the government to be of public interest for that country, there will be a possibility to make an early warning with the applicant concerned in the first 60 days of the launching, so not of the launching, of the names becoming public, so not from January but from April. And this will be at no cost. An objection from a trademark holder will be what Mr. Van Gelder explained will cost a fee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The GAC early warning system was actually part of the slide, the early timeline slide that was cut off, so I didn't mention it, so thank you for doing so. There's a question at the back, I believe.
Николай Блъсков се казвам, искам да попитам какво става с вноската от $185,000, ако апликацията, заявлението бъде отхвърлено, и дали се плаща преди заявлението или след като бъде одобрено.
Thank you for your question. The application fee is due at the moment you submit your application, and if it is not paid by the time you have submitted your application and the application window is closed, then you will not be approved in that application cycle. So the application will not move forward. So it is due once you submit your application. The application fee itself, if you are rejected, that is a specific case. There is a refund program in place if you opt to withdraw your application before the end of the process, with certain steps that allow you to get certain levels of refund. So for example, if you've submitted your application and after May the 1st, when you become aware of all the other applicants, when ICANN has published that list, and you suddenly realize that someone else is applying for something that makes your project non-viable, either because the string is too close or because they have better rights to what you're doing than you do, whatever the case may be, then you may elect not to continue. And that choice is being given to you through ICANN's program, and if you withdraw early, you will get 70% back of the amount. So whatever happens, if you're going into this process, and your question is important in underlining this, it's important to realize that you will be paying at least 30% of the $185,000. That is the minimum cost that it will take to go in, put your name up on the list, send your application in. And that's obviously if you've done everything yourself. If you go, if you seek expertise to help you do that, then those costs are obviously outside the ICANN fee. So there is a refund process, but if you get rejected at the end of the process, after everything's done, ICANN rejects your application, there is also a possibility of electing to ask for something called extended evaluation, which may in certain cases, it depends on the reason why you failed, it may in certain cases incur additional costs of something like $50,000, I believe. But there is a possibility, even if you get rejected, to continue to try and get your application approved.
I'm sorry, but we will not have enough time for more questions now. I'm sure you're here the whole day, so eventually everyone can meet you and pose you their questions. Thank you, Stefan, for this presentation.